And welcome on in, everybody. Another edition here of Fridays with Phillip on the Auburn Undercover podcast. My name is Nathan King, joined as always by the titular Phillip Marshall, and Ronnie Sanders is back on the show this week. And Phillip, you and I were both out there today on the just absolutely blistering practice field on a Thursday. You and I were talking before we got rolling. I have never seen so many players have to hands on hips, getting doused by water bottles, cooling towels on the back of their necks. I don't know if y'all have ever used those, by the way. They're game changers during yard work. But, I mean, it was an insanely hot day, but seemed like a good day. Seemed like a good first day of camp. Phillip, usually every first day of camp is always a good day. But I thought it was a good conversation with Hugh Freeze this morning. I thought you had a couple good questions for him. And I thought we learned a little bit about this team. We're obviously going to learn a lot more over the next 14 practices.
Yeah, first, let me tell you, when you get old, you'll know that the best way to do yard work is hire somebody to do it.
My parents started hiring somebody as soon as I left the house, I think.
No, I thought he was pretty interesting today. As I wrote in my column, he just seems different than he did a year ago, and he just seems a lot more comfortable with. And to be fair, last year he kind of what he tried to do last year did not work staff wise and all those things, but I just think he's a lot more comfortable now. He's got more talent now. I mean, a lot of them are young, especially a lot of those wide receivers, but they're definitely more talented than what he's had. So, and you're right, it was hot. It was too hot to me. And, always the first day of practice is kind of fun. Nobody's legs gone dead on them. They're not beat up and bruised up. But, one of the interesting things, Ronnie, and because you've been out at preseason camps a lot of times, I did ask him about how you balance getting ready for the physical nature of playing in the SEC and keeping your players healthy. And I think what I read out of what he said, Nathan, you like to hear what you think, but was that, guys that have proven they can do it are not going to be put in harm's way a lot. On the other hand, obviously, if you're a freshman offensive lineman or a defensive lineman who hasn't played, then you're going to have to be in the pit and show you can.
Yeah, it's a different day now than it used to be, Phillip. I remember when I worked at Florida, and we've talked about this before, but we'd have two-a-days, and we'd get up early, and the first group would come out. I think it was at 7, and we practice for 2 hours. Then we'd do specialists in the middle. Bring the second group out, do specialists in the middle, send the first group in, and then the coaches had another 2 hours after that with the second group, and then we did the same thing at night. We talk about a long day.
No, I could remember, you'd go to the coach's office. That's back when I could just walk into a coach's office and say what's going on. Far different from today. But all of them, you could say they'd been sleeping on the sofa in their office, and it was brutal. And you go back to the 80s, most of the players went home for the summer, and they all had a workout plan, and some of them didn't. Some of them followed it, and some of them mostly had fun and ate mama's cooking, and they came back, and they weren't ready. And so a lot of the early part of camp conditioning was a big part of it too. And but now, they're in shape because they all stay in school. They all quote voluntarily go through the summer workout. And
we used to have what we call voluntary mandatory workouts. It's not voluntary you come, but it's also not mandatory you play.
Other side of the state, but I asked Mike Dubose one time. I was down there for something. This is when I was in Montgomery, and we were sitting there on the bench talking, and they were doing something on the field or whatever. And I said, "Aren't these workouts, they're supposed to be voluntary, right?" He said, "Yeah, they're voluntary." And he said, "It's also voluntary whether I play them or not."
Right.
But anyway, this Auburn team to me, Nathan, and of course you can't just base it on physical characteristics. Just because the guy's a terrific physical specimen doesn't necessarily mean he's going to trot out there the first game and play like a veteran. But this Auburn team, really more than probably in the last 4 or 5 years, looks like an SEC team. I mean, they just look the part, and I think that's important. And but now, again, a lot of young guys, how they going to do? We'll have to see.
Well, my guess is they'll be a lot better in game 6, 7, 8 than they are in game 1, 2, 3. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
Especially as much as those young guys are going to play.
It's interesting when you think about it. For all the stuff last year, if you just look at that season, clearly if they play just a normal game, or even maybe not even that, they're going to beat New Mexico State and Maryland, and they had Alabama beat. So if they win those 3 games, they're 9-3. I mean, that's how close they were being. I mean, they weren't very close to beating New Mexico State in that game, but Auburn should never lose to New Mexico State, obviously. And I think that's something that Hugh has taken ownership of. And there's one thing that just would be a disaster this year. It would be to lose one of those kinds of games again.
Yeah.
I mean, if you lose Oklahoma at home, you lost. But if you lose to New Mexico, who, by the way, is a significantly stronger program than New Mexico State is, that's not going to be good. Of course, if you lost to Alabama A&M, that would be really, really bad. But yeah. I don't anticipate that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested, Phillip, to see. We talked about this on last week's show, and then we finally got to see them in person. But Lambert Smith and Perry Thompson, I think, demanded a lot of attention today. There's just a lot of gravity around those couple guys. You and I were talking before we got rolling, and Freeze talked about it today. What does it take for a freshman receiver to be able to play right away? And the first thing he said, he admitted it. He was like, you have to be good enough physically. You have to be good enough athletically. You can't teach a lot of that stuff because the defensive backs in the SEC are so good. You just inherently have to have those abilities. But you talked about before we got going, Phillip, like it's now more than ever in college football. You as a coach may say, I know this guy may not be completely ready, but we got to get him out there a good bit because it's easier than ever to just say, I'm not playing that much. I can just leave. I'm not saying Perry Thompson's going to do that, but you wonder if there is that bit of pressure on pushing coaches right now.
I don't believe there's any question about it because, a guy, and we're talking about Perry Thompson, and I have no idea that he would leave no matter what. So it's not anything we know about him specifically. We can say the same thing about Cam Coleman or any of them. But not only if word gets out that you're going to leave, then the bidding war can start. So it's just a whole different world. So yeah, he's got you just about have to play him. Now there are positions where guys understand. Offensive lineman, he comes in hoping to play as a freshman, but he knows the odds are against him because there's just not very many freshman offensive linemen playing significant roles. A few, not many. So that's going to be real interesting to see. Another interesting thing I saw today was Speak. Is that the former walk-on now? His name?
Yep.
Getting a lot of reps at safety.
Yeah, he's in the 2 deep.
Yeah, that may be that's going to be a vanishing breed if all this settlement comes about.
Yeah. So as Phillip was kind of mentioning there, 2 guys were put on scholarship today. Griffin Speaks, who's a great story, by the way, former quarterback at Auburn High School, went to play at Baylor, played safety at Baylor, was a walk-on. Then when Ron Roberts was hired as the DC last year, came over, he actually called him and said, hey, we got a spot. Come to Auburn. Come back home. And now he's on scholarship. And we saw this same sort of thing with him last year that Phillip just mentioned. Like, he's a graduate senior. He's got a lot of experience. I mean, guys like Terrence Love, guys like CJ Johnson at safety, like Speaks is repping above them right now. That has a lot to do with his experience level. And then Justin Jones at running back, former UAB transfer, a guy from Bessemer. I think we all sort of assume they may put someone else on scholarship at running back because of the Brian Battie situation. So, fun to get those always. No scholarship video or anything like that. Maybe they'll put one of those out, but that was a couple of the newsy things from Freeze this morning. Also, Phillip, Alex McPherson, that was really positive, I think.
Yeah.
From Freeze.
Yeah. We had a message board poster who said he was out for the year. I think you commented on that thread, didn't you, Nathan?
I did.
Yeah. Well, maybe
he is actually engaged to my first cousin's daughter. And I was up there this past weekend. Apparently he's lost he's out of the hospital, but apparently had lost a significant amount of weight and is doing better. But he's still got a long way to go, I think.
Your first cousin's daughter is your second cousin.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
That's true.
I couldn't have been able to answer that one. Yeah, I mean, he's he looks obviously thinner, but he was in street clothes today at practice. And he's progressing right now, and that's what Freeze said. I think any situation other than Freeze saying, yeah, we're going to medically redshirt him and he's not going to play, any other answer would have been a positive. And him saying, yeah, he's progressing nicely. He's not ready to practice yet, but he's going to be here. I thought that was really, really positive. At the end of the day, though, it's going to be Towns Magoo for a while, which you don't want to rely on a freshman walk-on at kicker, but he was dynamite in the spring game.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. And he was dynamite in the spring game, and really, I mean, the mental pressure is greater, but as far as kicking a 50-yard field goal, that's the same in the spring game as it is in the Alabama game. Goalposts still the same size, but I'll be surprised if he's not a star this year. Of course, I thought there was a good chance that McPherson might, he would go to the NFL at the first possibility, but this might delay that, I would think.
Yeah, I think Auburn may have thought that too. And so it'll be interesting to see how that works.
Who else are the key contributors for this season? I know we've got, Peyton Thorne obviously needs to have a good year. What are your thoughts on him, and who else might step up?
I think they're pretty. And I hate to use terms like loaded, but I think they got three really definite high SEC running backs. The receivers we talked about. I think the offensive line is going to be a lot better. I think Connor Lew at center is got a chance to be a great player. Jeremiah, every time I've ever seen him play, he's buried people. But yet he has never played all that much. It's been kind of puzzling. But I think he's going to be something special. I think they got and Hugh touched on today that they're not real deep at linebacker, but I think they're fine at linebacker, probably 1.5 deep maybe. I think the secondary is young. I think my biggest question is the defensive line, interior defensive line. I don't know that they have a guy in there that's a real difference maker. They may, but I don't know.
What are your thoughts as far as DJ Durkin's obviously the new coordinator? He's really close to Will Muschamp, and certainly I'm not sure that anybody's personality is close to Will Muschamp, but DJ,
it is not maybe quite as over the top as Wiggles, but he's a fiery guy now, and everything I've seen in the spring and everything else, he's always excited. Charles Kelly's always excited, and as a result, the players are always excited. I think the players apparently love playing for it, and that's going to be interesting to see. That's one of the things I look forward to seeing, and that he thought very confidently about Peyton Thorne today. When I talked to Ken Austin in the spring, he talked very confidently about Peyton Thorne. I think what they really like about him is his intelligence and his knowledge of the game. Of course, he's been playing since about 1975, but I think they're quite comfortable with Peyton Thorne. I really do. Now, what's going to be interesting is to see who is number two. Though my guess is they won't designate anybody as number two going into the season. Somebody will be number two in their mind, but I don't think they will. I think there'll be a depth chart that probably says Peyton Thorne and then two or three other guys, or would be my guess. I don't know. And there's really not any reason to, really. Though somebody's going, you would hope for sure that some number of them will get to play in the first game. That might tell you something, whoever plays first behind Thorne against Alabama A&M. That might tell you something.
You mentioned that young secondary, Phillip. I thought it was quite the proclamation from Freeze today saying, look, how the young receivers develop and how the young DBs develop, he said that's the key to the season. Because he basically said every other position, they feel like they kind of know what they have already, even if some aren't great. Like the D-line has questions, like maybe some are better than others. It's a good point, I think, by him, because on one side, it's how good does your passing game become throwing the ball. On the other side, it's how good can you defend the passing game. And so, that's what he said. He said that's the key to the season. How well the DBs and the receivers are able to develop could determine Auburn's ceiling this year.
Well, as far as the receivers go, that also plays into how well you can run the ball. Both ways, really. You got to run the ball. You don't have to average 250 yards a game, but you've got to be able to run the ball, or else you're always going to have trouble throwing it because they're not worried about you running it. But one thing I think gets overlooked about Peyton Thorne, he made a lot of big plays with his legs last season.
He sure did.
And he is a really good athlete. He's not an elite athlete, that changes, that his running can just makes you do different things on defense than you would like to do. But he is certainly a good runner that can take advantage when the opportunity arises.
Well, I don't know about you guys.
I think the schedule is obviously difficult. I don't understand how you can make a schedule and then before you finalize it, you look at it and you say, well, this team's got to go on the road 3 straight weeks and doesn't have a single home game in October. I don't see how you don't look at that and say we got to adjust that some way. Now, I don't know how the process works. I think a lot of it is like everything else, some computer program probably. But also Auburn could have, they got an open date in October. They could have scheduled one of those non-conference games and had the open date either earlier or later. But so that was on them. But having to play, they got to play 3 teams that could be nationally ranked in a row on the road. That's pretty tough. Georgia, Missouri, and Kentucky, right? I think that's right.
I believe so.
We don't know if Kentucky could be nationally ranked, but Georgia and Missouri, that could be 2 top 10 teams.
No question. Well, I'm a little bit, I don't know about you guys, but I'm a little bit surprised that Hugh Freeze hasn't taken the Brian Harsin approach and just said they'll not worry about recruiting and just going to out coach everybody.
Just out coach everybody. Yeah, well,
everybody.
it worked very well for Harsin. So I
tell you what. Speaking of recruiting, what are your thoughts on Auburn's haul the last few days, and even since Freeze was hired?
One thing that I saw where John Cohen said was that one of the reasons that they liked T. Freeze because they thought he was a great recruiter, and he said, but it turns out, he said, he's far better than even I thought. And he used the word relentless. And but as he said today, as you said today, it's not like he's doing it by himself. In fact, these guys are establishing relationships and staying after it. And Jason and I just did a conversation the other day, and he said, everybody thinks it's all NIL, but it's not. He said a lot of it is relationships. And some of college recruiting, I mean, obviously NIL has changed it, but I'm not sure that it has become just a purely transactional business. Some people think it is.
Well, I tend to agree with that. I think that at the end of the day, I mean, some kids are going to make a decision based strictly on the money, but I think the majority, I would say, you still want to go somewhere where you're comfortable with players on the team, you're comfortable with the school, you're comfortable with the coaching staff, and you're comfortable with the place. And I still think
I've had a lot of Auburn coaches tell me over the years that if we can get them on campus, we got a really good chance to get them.
That's right.
And because Auburn it's different, and it's now some guys don't like that. Some guys would rather be in a big city and bright lights and all that. But if a college town, where everybody's on your side, and it's a pretty good place to be, I would think.
It's a really interesting place and a really special place. And the over the years, I've talked to a bunch of players and a bunch of coaches and a bunch of coaches' wives, and most of them enjoy coming back, and a lot of them come back and live there.
Yeah, it's amazing how many even fired coaches come back and live there. But not everybody. That's not everybody's cup of tea. So,
right.
If there's a guy he wants the bright lights in the big city, then that's probably not. But if you want a true college town where everything revolves around the university, and football is probably the most watched part of it, and everybody knows who you are, and everybody's pulling for you until you do bad, and they start getting on social media and telling you stink.
And the other thing, it's also, you look at the top jobs in the country, and Hugh Freeze has referenced this. I mean, Auburn's is a top 10 job, and there aren't a lot of places that really compare.
And the interesting thing, considering what we've just talked about here these last couple of minutes, the interesting thing is that it takes a lot of hard work to have an elite recruiting class, obviously, but to have just not do it at Auburn, I mean, there's just no excuse for that. If you just try, you're going to do all right. Just try a little bit.
And not Auburn related, but and we talked about this, I think, on a previous podcast. And I think Billy Napier is a great guy and a pretty good coach, but I'm just not sure what's going on down there. I'm not sure how you can be as behind as they seem to be at that place. I just
Yeah, and you've been there. Yeah, I mean, and the same thing's true. I mean, it's a bigger city, obviously, but it's not a giant city, but it's all about the University of Florida, and great weather, pretty girls.
Yeah, and it's I met my wife there and lived there for 3 years, and it was it's one of my favorite. I've lived around a lot of places, and it was one of my favorite places to live. I really enjoyed living there. Really enjoyed being around the university, and when I was there, we didn't have good facilities. Had great fan support, and until we got there, and then they figured out we were replacing Spurrier, and they didn't care much for that. But we ended up we got booed more at home we did on the road. But all that said, the facilities weren't great, and now you've got an $80-something million football facility there. They're about to spend, I think I read $500 million or something like that on facilities over the next 10 years. You got a great school. It's a great place to play. I'm just not sure why it's been so difficult to flip. I was reading the other day. I'll have to find the text message I got. It was, I forget how many players, the last national championship team that Urban Meyer had. I forget how many players had been arrested. I think it was, it was pretty shocking.
Yeah, when Auburn was there, it was bad. Mm-hmm. And I don't blame coaches usually for players getting arrested. You make bad decisions, you pay the price. But it's one thing to get arrested for minor things, and another thing to get arrested for domestic violence. And that guy, the receiver at Georgia, got kicked off the team just yesterday or today. And coaches are slow to do that these days. To invest their money by the university, which may well have been the case at Georgia.
I just found the link I was looking for. It says the 2008 Florida Gators won the national championship. 41 players from that roster have been arrested.
How many?
41.
Goodness gracious alive.
One in every 3 players on that team has spent time in jail.
Wow.
Now, that was 2008, so
But the thing is, I think that hurts recruiting, and I remember going way back now to when Bo Jackson was being recruited. At that time, Alabama had a couple of incidents of guys having guns inside Brown Hall, and even one case of I'm not going to name names of a guy threatening teammates with a gun, and it was widely reported. And anyway, the indoor track meet was at Garrett Coliseum in Montgomery, and Bo was there winning whatever he was doing, high jump or whatever. But in between his backs, he came up and said in the stands, Bobby Wallace, who was his main recruiter, was sitting up there, and Bo came to sit on the next row down because Bobby couldn't talk to him. The rules at the time, he was not allowed to talk to him. But I talked to him, and that's the first time I ever interviewed him. I called him Vincent. That's how early on it was. And anyway, I asked him, I said, how close are you to making a commitment? He said, probably pretty close. And I said, who else are you considering? I said, are you considering Alabama? And his response was, my mother would never get a good night's sleep if I went to Alabama. And I said, who else are you considering? He said, Tennessee. I said, have you visited there? He said, nope. I said, are you going to visit there? He said, nope. I thought to myself, I said, this guy's going to Auburn.
And I think you're right, Phillip. It certainly affects recruiting. I mean, and at some point, look, everybody to some extent recruits close to the edge, and some people have more tolerance than others. But I remember we brought in this kid at Florida. You guys probably remember him. I think he played at 5 or 6 different schools. Willie Williams.
Oh yeah.
And he had his reputation preceded him. And so we got him on campus for a visit. I think it was Friday night. It was Friday night. He gets in, he's from Miami, and he gets into town, and we start having problems immediately. And next thing you know, we get a call, I think it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and he came in and had ripped the fire extinguisher off the wall in the hotel and was spraying it everywhere.
Always will be boys.
We sent his ass home.
Yeah, he was a big story during recruiting. I don't remember exactly what all the details were, but I do remember that.
And then the Brian Paddock kid that was murdered when he committed and signed with Miami. At one point, he came out. I remember his visit, just like it was yesterday. He came out of his official visit, and he committed to us. He was in the head coach's office, came out, and he's all excited. The coaches are excited. He's a great player, and it didn't take us long to figure out that he was also committed to Florida State and Miami all at the same time.
There was some kid, I don't remember who it was years ago, who called the press conference to commit and committed to 2 schools. He said, I'm committing to Florida and whoever else it was.
You never know.
Yep.
And just because somebody commits, you remember the Quanjo kid that his brother played in Alabama, and then the brother comes out and commits to Auburn, and the parents wouldn't hear of it. They ended up going to Alabama.
Yeah, he committed to Auburn on TV.
Yep.
Because everybody was just sitting there waiting. He was going to Alabama. His brother was there, and he was like a huge prospect. Mm-hmm. And he just gets up there and announces he's going to Auburn. Didn't last.
That's right. His lead recruiter
and Daddy had said, "Hey, get something done about this."
Well, I know his lead recruiter, I believe, was Sal Sinceri, who was a really good friend of mine, and I knew when the kid committed that it probably wasn't going to stick. Well, the Olympics have been going on. Before we wrap up, what are your thoughts on Suni Lee and her comeback and the Olympics?
I thought it was amazing, honestly. I mean, from what I understand, like as recently as early this year, she didn't think she had any chance to be ready to do that. I'm not sure what her. I think she had some kind of kidney issue, I believe. But
yep.
But and to come back and to help them win the gold medal, and then to just her last. I mean, I'm not a gymnastics expert, and I'm sure not a floor exercise expert. I can't tell whether they're doing good or not, but apparently just really put on a show and get the bronze medal. And I thought that was a tremendous thing. And I thought it was really cool that she and Simone Biles ran around the arena together with an American flag. And then I saw another picture of Simone taking a selfie of her and the Brazilian girl that finished second, and Suni. And I thought it was pretty cool. But I think she's a remarkable story and a remarkable athlete. And it was really what was during the team competition. She was getting ready, and it was kind of, there was a pause, and the crowd kind of went quiet, and you heard somebody yell, "War Eagle!" And she turned around and looked and gave a fist pump, and I thought that was pretty good. I think, from what I'm told, she really, really loved her time at Auburn. Somebody asked her if she could come back, and I guess she could. I don't see any reason why she couldn't. I mean, being in the Olympics doesn't take away your eligibility. I would be surprised if she did, but I guess she could.
She was certainly impressive.
But I'll tell you what, now Simone Biles is impressive too. Mm-hmm. She was good. I'll tell you what, when they do the stuff they do on that balance beam, I just shake my head. I can't imagine
that. I couldn't have imagined it 20 years ago, and I certainly can't now.
Oh, I never could have imagined it. But But no, I think she's a real good. So in fact, both of them, her and Simone Biles, both. I mean, Simone pulled out of last year, the Olympics in Tokyo because of basically from mental issues. I mean, that's what she said, and she can't. That's a great comeback for her too, and she really is. I mean, I guess she's the most decorated American woman ever in the Olympics. Won more medals. That's pretty impressive. And the United States, what's different now, at least with the United States, most of the gymnasts used to be like 16, and now they're older. And certainly the U.S. team's older.
It's been an interesting Olympics so far. I've really enjoyed it. Kids have too, actually.
But I think getting back to football, I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it all comes together. I think they have a chance to be somewhere between pretty good and very good, but they also have a chance to go 6-6. And of course, a lot, as we all know, always depends on injuries. And then sometimes it's just the bounce of the ball. You play a lot of close games. Sometimes you'll lose by you didn't do anything wrong. It just happened.
Well, and I think the other thing you mentioned at the top of the show, Phillip, Hugh Freeze certainly seems more comfortable. Certainly seems more comfortable. Not just at Auburn, with his staff, with the recruiting, everything.
Yeah. And I don't think he's ever been uncomfortable at all. I think he before he was ever here, he sent his daughters here to Auburn. But and he would have come to work for Gus if they would have let if the SEC would have let him hire him. At the time they wouldn't. And but I think he's just a whole lot more comfortable with his staff. I think he if I would second guess anything about him, it would be why did he do this to begin with?
And it may have been simply because he needed to focus on recruiting so heavily.
I'm just talking about hiring people because he didn't know Phillip Montgomery. I mean, may have known him, but he would.
Well, I think I guess my point was I think he was looking for somebody that he could hand more off to, so he could focus on.
I think that's exactly right. But at any rate, he said today, and I don't blame him. He said he didn't want to talk about last year anymore. So, but historically, his teams have gotten better pretty fast, and historically, in recent decades, Auburn coaches, if they worked really good their first year, they have been their second year. I mean, Tuberville went 5-6 and should have done better. They gave away some games, and then went to the SEC championship game the next year. Dye went 5-6 and then went 9-3. Terry was great his first and second year. Terry Bowden, and then
Chiswick won a national championship in his second year.
Chiswick won a national championship in his second year, and Gus played for it his first year. So it's been a while since a new Auburn coach didn't do something good, except for maybe I'm just trying to wipe some things out of my mind, but except for Hugh's predecessor.
Potato. We'll refer to him as Potato from now on.
I'm not going to do that, but it's one of the watching that unfold was pretty remarkable.
What's crazy, Phillip? You talked about like the ball needs to bounce a certain way, all that kind of stuff. How close they were last year to 9-3, and I agree with you that obviously they weren't close to beating Mississippi State or New Mexico State. But in the grand scheme of things, if they meet that team 100 times, they should beat them probably 98 of those times. Right. It's crazy looking back, even just talking about how the Harsin thing just melted down. If Bo Nix doesn't get injured, what does that mean? I mean, they started 6-2 under Harsin and were a top 15 team when the first playoff rankings came out. They beat a top 10 Ole Miss team at home. Now, I think the writing was on the wall in terms of recruiting and overall program development. But it just goes to your point, Phillip. Like sometimes you are very close to another path, and you have no idea until you go down it how close you really were, or how close you are to making a championship team.
Look at the fumbled punt against Alabama last year. That wasn't a play Alabama made. That's just a guy dropping the ball. And he was out there because the regular guy, Keontae, had a stinger or whatever, and that was the only play he missed.
Yep.
Then you look at Georgia, and Jalen Simpson gets hurt, and the tight end runs wild. If Jalen Simpson doesn't get hurt, I mean, they would have had a chance to win that game probably. And of course, Alabama. I mean, that's the 4th and 31. I mean, that was just you can question you can question the defensive call, but the fact of the matter is, the cornerback didn't do what he was supposed to do, and the safety that was supposed to be over there to help in the end zone ran the opposite direction. So, but it's a play that will live in that, much like the kick six, that play that will live in Alabama lore and Auburn infamy, and so it will always be. You mentioned what happens.
Yeah, you mentioned Georgia. I was at the Georgia game last year. I took my 12-year-old, and first Georgia game she'd been to, and so we're sitting there, and I'd already told her what to expect, but she didn't. It's hard to explain to and so the lady behind us, the whole group behind us starts barking, and she looks at, she says, "What are they doing?" I said, "They're barking." She said, "Why?" I said, "Well, they're supposed to be bulldogs, so they're barking." And it didn't take her long. She says, "I'm about to go back there and slap that lady." Right? Like, no, let's not do that. But it's
Tuberville, when they lost to Georgia Tech in Atlanta in 2003, after they'd been shut out by Southern Cal, then they went to Georgia Tech and got beat 17-3. But Georgia Tech had a freshman quarterback, and Suzanne and Troy and Tucker were there, and Troy and Tucker were young then, and Tuberville asked them after the game or back at home, "But what did you enjoy the most?" And one of them says, "The fight." He said, "What are you talking about?" Like, it turned out some fan had turned around and was cussing Suzanne because they were playing bad, and some other fan had decked him. But I haven't sat in the stands in many years, but I'm sure things get interesting.
It's having moved back here 4 years ago, it'd been a long time since I've been in the stands. I've been on the sidelines for a few games, but I hadn't really been in the stands until kids were old enough to start going and move back here. But it's Jordan-Hare Stadium can be a wild place. It's
well, I mean, you just the things people said during media days. It's a tough place to play, and and Auburn has. It's been a long time since Auburn put equal talent on the field to Alabama. But they beat them in 2017. They beat them in 2019, and really should have beaten them in 2021 and 2023.
Yep.
And Alabama had more talent, obviously, in every one of those games. Now, Auburn had some difference makers. And to me, that's the biggest thing. You got to have difference makers. If you don't have difference makers, you got no chance in the SEC.
Well, with expansion and, with the Iron Bowl rivalry and realignment, all this stuff, it's really going to be, it's going to be an interesting.
It's going to be unlike any season ever.
And
I mean, it really is. I mean, no divisions, 16 teams. I mean, gosh, somebody's got to finish 16th. Of course, we all know who that's likely to be.
Yeah.
But you never know. I don't think Mississippi State's going to be very good either. So I don't know if they play. Mississippi State and Vanderbilt. I don't know if they play or not. It could be for 16th if they do.
Yep, fellowship.
But it's got and of course the 12-team playoff, and that's good for coaches and bad for coaches. It's good for coaches because more of them got a chance to get in the playoff on their resume. It's bad for coaches because, and we talked about this some last week, it's bad for coaches because fans think they're always supposed to be there now. And so, I don't think Auburn fans necessarily expect to be in the playoff this year, but next year they're going to start expecting it. Yeah, I think I said last week, to be in the top, as it is right now, top 11, because the group of 5 teams going to get in, you got to have a really good team to be in the top 11.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, Phillip. Yeah. Ronnie, we ran through like the teams, the group, the Power 5 teams that finished the best 11 Power 5 teams. It's about the worst way I could have explained that last season. And it's like, it goes to show, and every one of those teams was like 10 or 11 wins. So I think there's just we're sort of discussing the conversation of like, oh, an SEC team can just go 9-3 and get in the playoff from now moving forward. And while I think that can be the case a lot, like there's a lot of good teams in college football, and they are all probably going to be ranked higher than you if you have 3 losses.
The problem with that, though, is that, to me, is that if you're not in the SEC or the Big Ten, and let's just say you're North Carolina, and you go 10-2, and LSU is 9-3, and it's between the two of you, who do you think's going to go? I think LSU's going to go.
No question.
And I think the Big Ten and the SEC both are itching to lock in a certain number of teams. It's going to be real interesting to see when the negotiations start after next year for the new contract. They kind of got Sankey to give in this time. I'm not sure he'll give in the next time.
Well, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but I mean, you look at the Big 12 now and where that could end up. And, I was down at UCF visiting a couple of their coaches a few weeks ago, and they feel like they've got a chance to be really good. I mean, really, really good.
Why'd they have a losing record last season?
Well, like I say, I think they've, and again, I'm just going by what the coaches tell me. They think they've got a chance to be really good. I guess my question is,
they got a quarterback now. They've
got a quarterback, and they've got a bunch of really good players. I mean, I say that to circle back. Who in the world at Florida decided to schedule UCF and Miami as the out of conference?
I guess my friend Scott Strickland. Well, they got based on. I guess that's who.
I think if I'd been Billy Napier, I'd have asked out of that before I took the job.
Florida State won't play Central Florida. I don't think they haven't. Have they?
I wouldn't. Why would you?
Well,
I wouldn't if I were them.
People ask me, say, well, why doesn't Auburn play Troy or UAB instead of Alabama A&M? Because you can't play bad enough to lose to Troy or UAB.
And Auburn used to play UAB from time to time, but that was when UAB. That was then. This is now.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, they got Jacksonville State back on the menu.
You were there when they all played them, weren't you? Connie?
I played.
Auburn played UAB.
Yes, I was also there when we lost to UAB at LSU.
But Auburn won 29-0, and just basically handed the ball off the whole game. And the next week they played Fresno State, who was a close friend. The head coach was a close friend of the Bowden family. And they came out, spread the field, playing fast. And I think it was 56-0, if I'm not mistaken. And their coach said after the game, he said, we spent the whole week working on tackling Stephen Davis. He said they kind of bamboozled us. But
Terry always liked to throw it around. I mean, he'd run it if he had to, but I think his preference was to just throw it around.
My biggest memory of that Fresno State game is I stopped at Alex City to get some gas and filled up my gas tank with diesel fuel. I had to get it towed up to some garage in Alex City so they could siphon. Because they told me that if you tried to start it, that'd have been toast. That engine would have been done.
No
I
question.
realized it just. Oh my God! I can't believe I just did that. But
Good thing you realized.
yeah, it is. But it was a company car too. It wasn't my car. So.
Oh,
Well, Phillip, it's been good.
Always football time. That's summers are great, and of course it's still summertime. That's why I always say preseason camp instead of fall camp.
I was gonna say, Phillip, you don't want to go to fall camp tomorrow
right now. But it's always fun when it gets close to time. And I was going to tell y'all one other thing that's really unrelated that John Cohen said in that interview. He was talking about, the salary cap, so to speak, the 22%. And Andy asked him if Auburn was going to do that, and his response was, "This is an example." He said, "I don't think I could look Bruce Pearl in the eye and tell him the Alabama coach is getting more than he is." He said, "I don't want to be a part of anything like that." That's not an exact quote, but that's what he said. So I think everybody in the SEC is going to have to be all in. If you're not, then you're not going to get very far.
That's right. Especially when you look at who you have to compete against.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's I feel terrible for the group of 5 teams.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're already in a bad way, because anytime they get a really good player, they immediately get snatched away.
No question. Yeah, I thought it was interesting that correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Trent Dilfer, when he got the UAB job, said they were going to out recruit everybody in the state except Alabama.
Yeah, I think he did say. I know he said that.
I wonder how he feels about that now.
I think, and I don't know Trent Dilfer, never met him, and I thought he was a pretty decent NFL quarterback when everybody else said he stunk. But anyway, I just don't believe I'd have said that if I'd been him. But he seems to talk a really good game. I'll just put it that way.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what it looks like on the field. That's going to be interesting to watch too, as that unfolds. But Phillip, good to see you guys.
Always, Nathan.